this Saturday, a staggering 73 million Swedish kronor is on the line. But to actually claim that life-changing super jackpot, you have to realize a very uncomfortable truth about racing. And that is, the fastest horse on the track is probably going to lose.
Yeah, it sounds completely counterintuitive, right? But raw speed is really only one fraction of the equation here. Because when you introduce the chaotic variables of, a massive racing ticket, well, physics, geometry, and human error just completely take over.
Right, exactly. So welcome to this deep dive. We are so glad you're here. Because if you are trying to conquer the V85 this weekend, which for the uninitiated means correctly predicting the winner across 8 incredibly complex harness races, you really need an edge.
And giving you that edge is exactly our mission today. We've synthesized this absolute mountain of intel, expert analysis, and track data to break down V85-1 all the way through V85-8.
To really understand the intel, we first have to understand the battlefield itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. We are heading to the Örebro track, and Örebro is famous for one very specific architectural detail. It has a notoriously short homestretch. Basically creates this severe geometric bias toward frontrunners, what the intel refers to as the Spetsvener. If a driver decides to sit in the back of the pack, saving energy to make a final sprint on the straightaway, they will mathematically run out of track before they can pass the leaders.
Wow, so they literally just run out of runway, basically.
Exactly. And drivers know this. So the geometry fleeces them to launch their attacks much earlier. You'll see them often swinging out into the third passing lane by the second to last turn, just to even have a chance.
I mean, it's sort of like a high-speed game of musical chairs. If you aren't positioned near the front before the music stops on that final turn, well, that short homestretch means there are just no seats left. You're stranded in the back.
Yeah, that geometric trap is exactly what defines our first race today, V85-1. We are looking at the mares here in a really tricky volt start.
Okay, so right away we have this fascinating conflict between the favorite and the track bias.
Yeah.
The consensus heavily favors Masters Dunder Beta, and she is a total powerhouse.
She really is, but because of her past earnings, she is carrying a 20-meter handicap. She literally starts 20 meters behind the front line.
Wait, 20 meters behind on a track that actively punishes horses coming from the back.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, you have challengers like Virtual Reality, who is heavily backed to take the early lead from the front vault, and then Digital Last, who showed immense strength recovering from just a nightmare opening recently.
Are there any hidden long shots the intel is picking up on?
There are, actually. The intel points to quick starters like Mandragora, and also a completely hidden 1% long shot named Piraeus Boko. That horse has been quietly running barefoot recently with some really great results.
Okay, I have to push back on the consensus for this first race, though. We just established that Örebro aggressively favors the horses at the front.
Right, the geometry.
So why on earth is the collective intel so attached to Masters Dunder Beta, knowing she starts at a 20-meter geometric disadvantage? It just seems crazy.
Well, the analysis points to the sheer size of her physical engine, basically. Class can sometimes overwhelm a handicap, but the data clearly shows the front vaults hold a distinct mathematical edge at Örebro.
So if Virtual Reality gets the lead, what happens to the favorite?
If Virtual Reality secures the lead and the driver deliberately slows the pace during the middle of the race, Masters Dunder Beta has to do something incredibly inefficient. She has to swing out into the wider lanes to pass.
Burning massive amounts of energy.
Exactly. Burning huge amounts of anaerobic energy just to close that 20-meter gap before they even reach that short home stretch.
So backing the favorite means you are trusting her cardiovascular system to completely overpower the track's architecture.
You are basically betting on raw physiology over favorable geometry.
That tension between physiology and geometry is, it's a perfect bridge to the next leg. In V85-2, we transition from a crowded tactical start to a high-octane sprint over 1,609 meters.
And the consensus is essentially drooling over one horse here, Fine Manners.
Oh yeah, Fine Manners. The statistics surrounding this horse are almost difficult to process. 16 wins and 19 starts, right?
Yeah, 16. He just set a track record on a heavy, rain-soaked surface, too. There are already whispers in the data about him aiming for the Ulloppet, which is, the absolute pinnacle of Swedish trotting.
But he isn't running in a vacuum. You have Maroon Day riding a 5-race winning streak. And Eldorado Jet, an Italian powerhouse who was controversially disqualified last time out, but possesses just immense explosive capacity.
Right, but the common denominator in the intel regarding Fine Manners is a terrifying phrase. They say he has no known bottom.
No known bottom, so he just doesn't get tired.
Basically, yeah. No one has seen him hit his lactic acid threshold. He simply does not tire. And this creates a strategic nightmare for a challenger like Maroon Day, because to beat Fine Manners in a sprint, Maroon Day will likely be forced to race in what is called the death seat.
The Dodens.
Forcing Maroon Day to take the death seat against a horse whose physical limits are unknown is just a brutal war of attrition.
It's aerodynamic torture. But if you don't have a genetic freak like Fine Manners in your stable, how do you even compete?
Well, that brings us to V85-3, where the intel shows trainers trying to artificially manufacture that kind of speed. This is where equipment changes become the absolute focal point of the analysis.
Right. The favorites here are Tiberius Victory, who is pulling his back shoes for an impressive comeback, and Heelan Gore. That's a horse with only 2 starts this year, but massive potential, and he is also going barefoot in the back.
Then you have challengers like Kick the Man, who gets a major driver upgrade.
And the real local upset the sources are flagging is Magic Hell on his home track.
The trainers are signaling they believe these horses have the stability to handle the lighter balance and peak today.
But artificial speed only matters if you have the runway to use it. Stepping up to the heavyweights in V85-4, the elite division, we see how the track itself can just neutralize speed.
Yeah, it is very much a 2-horse narrative in the data here.
Kentucky River is a monster who clocked an incredible kilometer rate of 1 minute and 8 seconds over his final 700 meters last race. But facing him is Get a Wish, a lightning-fast horse returning from the U.S., who is expected to just blast to the early lead.
We should also note Bixby as a highly capable wild card in this race, though the sources suggest he may rely on passive tactics today.
Let's focus on that clash of styles, though. You have the explosive early speed of Get a Wish trying to outrun the monstrous, relentless finish of Kentucky River.
This is where we have to connect the athletes back to the Örebro track bias. Get a Wish is explosive out of the gate. The intel strongly suggests he will secure the lead quickly.
And once he does, the math changes.
Exactly. The mathematical reality of that short homestretch completely turns against Kentucky River.
Because even a 1 minute, 8 second kilometer rate doesn't matter if the race ends before you can actually use it.
The geometry protects the leader. Kentucky River has a devastating closing sprint, sure, but he requires a long straightaway to reach top speed and pass the field.
So he just runs out of room.
If Get a Wish reaches the final turn with a comfortable lead, Kentucky River simply runs out of real estate. The track architecture becomes an invisible defender for Get a Wish.
Man, runway is one type of geometry, but starting position is another entirely. Which brings us to V85-5. It's a return to the 1,609-meter sprint, where the starting draw dictates absolutely everything.
Yeah, over a distance that short, there's just no time to recover from a bad starting position.
The dilemma here centers around Ambrosino. The consensus widely considers him the best athlete in the field. But he drew a terrible, wide starting position in lane 7.
Meanwhile, his main challenger, Denaro Diabolic, sits in the perfect lane 2 with saved energy from his last race.
You also have Ollie Free, who is incredibly fast off the gate and upsets like Don Gaga trying barefoot from the inner rail. Oh, and Makers Wallace is stuck all the way out in lane 12. Let me push back on the consensus again here.
Go for it.
If Örebro is a front-runner's paradise, isn't backing Ambrosino from lane 7 just financial suicide for you as a listener?
The analysis strongly supports your skepticism there. The physics of lane 7 in a sprint are brutal. When a horse launches from a wide lane, they are fighting massive centrifugal force on that first turn. Which is exactly why the intel highlights Denaro Diabolic as the value-driven pivot. Lane 2 neutralizes Ambrosino's slight class advantage.
Because Denaro Diabolic doesn't have to fight that physics.
Right, he doesn't fight centrifugal force or waste energy finding a drafting position. He uses the geometry of the rail to save his engine for the final sprint.
So if you want to survive the V85, you need to know when geometry defeats class. But when does that rule fly completely out the window? Let's look at V85-6. The intel suggests this race is the safest anchor of the day, the unbeatable Queen Clarissa.
She represents a total statistical anomaly in the data.
She's an absolute European top mare aiming for the elite loppet. She won effortlessly in her comeback, clocking an elite 1.9 kilometer rate and drew the perfect lane 2.
Her main challenger is Megan VR, a Norwegian star debuting for an elite Swedish trainer.
But with 73 million on the line, I have to ask you, is it ever truly safe to anchor your entire ticket on one horse? Even a massive 70% favorite?
Well, safe is a very relative term in racing. A flat tire on the driver's sulky or a sudden break in stride can ruin literally any sure thing. But the reason the consensus anchors on Clarissa is her biological and psychological profile.
Okay, what makes her biologically different from the rest of the field?
She possesses this rare combination of explosive gait speed and an incredibly high cardiovascular threshold. She can secure the lead without dipping deep into her energy reserves.
But you mentioned her psychology, too.
Her real separator is psychological dominance. The intel shows that when other horses pull up beside her in the death seat to challenge, she doesn't just maintain her speed, she finds another gear.
Oh, wow, she just breaks him.
Exactly. She possesses a competitive courage that actively breaks the will of her challengers. Combine that physical and psychological superiority with the perfect lane 2 draw on a frontrunner's track, and she becomes the anchor you need.
You anchor your ticket with her so you can afford to spread your bets on the absolute chaos of the next leg. V85-7 is a 15-horse sport trapper.
The ultimate traffic jam.
You end up with 15 horses squeezed together in a highly confined space.
Right, and the sources highlight favorites like Fly Express, who flew down the stretch in his recent debut, and Dark Photon Face, a tricky but very capable frontrunner.
And you have horses trying to artificially overcome this traffic, like Brilliant Kid and Global Fighter, who are both stripping their shoes to find raw speed.
But relying on barefoot speed in a 15-horse cluster, it feels risky.
Yeah, it feels like trying to win a Formula One race while stuck in rush hour highway traffic. The car's engine almost doesn't matter if there's nowhere to drive.
That is the defining insight of this race, honestly. In a traffic jam, the most critical variable isn't the horse's raw speed. It is human decision-making. If we zero in on the common denominator in the intel for this race, it highlights the impact of driver changes.
We see that specifically with I Ain't No Quitter, who's getting a massive driver upgrade today. How much does the human actually matter when the horse is doing all the running?
In a crowded, highly tactical field, the driver dictates the spatial awareness of the entire race. A top-tier driver reads the micro-movements of the 14 other horses.
Looking for openings.
Right, they know the exact split second to slip out into the passing lane to catch a draft, and more importantly, they know when to stay tucked in and wait. Upgrading the driver on a capable horse like I Ain't No Quitter transforms him from a participant into a lethal threat. The horse provides the engine, but the elite driver solves the traffic puzzle.
So pay very close attention to who is holding the reins when the field gets crowded. Which brings us finally to the grand finale. V85-8, the Örebro International. The final hurdle standing between you and the 73 million.
And it is a grueling physiological test. A 3,140-meter marathon spanning 3 separate starting tiers.
Almost 2 full miles. I mean, the matchup here is just fascinating. We have a Fair Day, a true Elitloppet caliber superstar, but he's burdened with a massive 40-meter handicap.
He has to chase down Speed Change, who starts at the front line and remains undefeated for his new trainer.
Behind them, challengers like Eagle Rock are making huge comebacks, and Great Ruler is a dangerous frontier horse going barefoot. Let's look at the logistics of that 40-meter gap, though. Is it physically realistic to expect a Fair Day to make up 40 meters on a top-tier horse like Speed Change over 3 kilometers?
It is realistic, but it requires overcoming a deeply agonizing pacing strategy. The intel points to a specific cat-and-mouse dynamic inherent to this marathon distance. A Fair Day has to swing out into the 3rd and even 4th lanes to pass all the other horses. Running those final curves in the 4th lane adds significant distance to his trip.
So Speed Change uses the 3-kilometer distance not as a pure endurance test, but to dictate a sprint finish where he holds the ultimate geometric advantage.
To win from 40 meters back, a Fair Day needs a flawless trip, a massive surge of pace, and probably a few opposing drivers making mistakes to clear his path. The margin for error is essentially 0.
Wow. So let's synthesize the mission for you as you build your tickets today. Surviving the super jackpot requires a delicate balancing act. You need an immense respect for Örebro's short home stretch and the severe physical toll of bad starting positions.
Knowing when to fade a badly drawn favorite is key.
Exactly. But you also need the wisdom to recognize when a statistical anomaly like the raw power of Fine Manners or the psychological dominance of Clarissa can completely rewrite those geometric rules.
It really is the constant tension between the physics of the track and the physiology of the athlete.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We wish you the absolute best of luck navigating the traffic jams, decoding the intel, and chasing down that 73 million. We'll see you next time.